on to Season 5, which seemingly adapts the vast majority of the 4th and 5th books, because apparently they take place literally at the same time. Odd that Martin would choose to only tell part of the story and then save part of it for like another book. That really seems to be just an odd departure, but good product, though I'm starting to have my doubts. I'll get to that, though. I'll get to that. So, to start bringing up the storyline with Daenerys, except now it's getting a little more complicated because she's finally starting to interact with characters that aren't strictly part of her storyline, owing to the fact that Tywin finally encountered her, though it took more than half the season. Well, it's a decent progression of her storyline, though I wish that there was a little more of an explanation for this, I guess not brotherhood, but group that is trying to kill her. I wouldn't be too surprised if the books go into it, and we don't need to necessarily know everything about them, because, there is no strict leader associated with them, so from that perspective, that would tell me that Martin would already think they'll just have to kill her, and that's how you recognize them. Do you really need to know much else? I guess not. Her continued bits about trying to control the city and then having it fail, well, goes to show you, she's no more immune to problems within, just like any other kingdom. Even if you just look at Roman Empire history, how many of those emperors were killed by either their own guard, the Senate at the beginning, relatives, or just anything like that? It's just crazy just how many of them had that occur to them. So is this really any different? No, because this is Roman society with the addition of castles being there and dragons and some magic. So yeah, I probably shouldn't have used Roman. I should have just said medieval, which is, I think, what I said in prior seasons. Right. But now that her dragons, or at least the black one, is big enough to ride now, even though it's just her, that's going to throw a new factor into things, especially since right at the end, when she seemingly encounters the Dothraki again, or at least I think it's them. It doesn't have to be them, but they all had weaponry similar. But then again, what's his face? The person that she's been sleeping with the one that, went for the horse instead of the rider at that city's gate, which is what I've been thinking. I'm like, yeah, don't go for the guy, go for the horse. He's not expecting that, but he had a similar weapon to what the Dothraki were showing right at the beginning of the first couple episodes of the show, so maybe. I really want to know what that group was. Obviously, I'm going to find out when I start watching the next season, but nice. And then a Tyrion, him encountering Daenerys, and then her friend, it's not Jordan, but it's something like that. Sorry, I can memorize people's faces and describe their relationships with other people, but all the names, unfortunately, it's just not coming to me. Okay, it took me forever to remember that Lana Henley's character is named Cersei. Right. This is going to be very interesting because clearly he's not completely with anyone in Westeros anymore. On the contrary, he seems to want them to fall for some of the same ideas that all the others are doing, but I don't know, though, because you gotta remember, Jaime's still there, because there does seem to be some hope for him. We'll get to that later, and at the same time, yes, he wants the idea of the monarchy and all the big prominent people in there to fall, but he doesn't want the place to be laid to ruin. And Daenerys doesn't want that either. That's why she keeps insisting. Things are going to change here. Only free people fighting in the pits? It just, She doesn't want it to all go to ruin. So, that's a tough thing to do. Whoa. Alright. So he's got to figure out this delicate balance himself, because everyone, in simple terms, is going to view him as a traitor. Tyrion, I mean, so... Nothing to do but wait and see. Though it's nice to see that the priest guy has, well... Again, he's not a priest, he just looks like so many, priest characters and similar things to this that I keep saying that. I'm sorry about that. It's nice to see that he finally picked a side. More or less. So I said that takes care of Daenerys and all of her related parties. Next thing to do is to discuss the Wall storyline, although now it's not just the Wall anymore, because now you got to deal with the Wildlings actually being around and being prominent characters. Definitely took some work that Snow had to do on the... not lead Wildling guy, but the Brute guy. Although now that we're seeing him actually discuss things with Snow, you can tell that that guy does have a brain behind it. But was he fueled by revenge? Yeah, but you can't really blame him. That wall being constructed for reasons that have never been outright stated? Shielding off a whole group of people that just want to survive as much as everyone else, even though somehow they managed that whole time. But now that they're one big force, it totally changes because a whole bunch of nomads all together like that, you can't just run away into the wilderness, even though they technically did here, or just disappear unawares. You gotta have enough substance to keep them going, and as people point out here, the seasonal cycles seem to be totally different, although the weird thing is, it doesn't seem like anyone across the sea seems to indicate that winter is a thing there, and even then, is winter a thing absolutely everywhere in regards to the show? I don't know. I'm sure some people that have read the books might know a little bit more about that. I haven't, and I personally don't think that I'm going to. I've got a lot of other things that I feel like reading, and of course this series, as I said, I don't think is going to end up being finished. We'll see if I'm right. I hope I'm not, but there you go. Yeah. But it makes sense that he was willing to work with Snow because he saw the logic. Because Snow, yes, at heart, he is a member of Westeros and the Night's Watch, but he has all groups' interest at heart, and he was willing to put aside preconceived notions about people, recognize the common enemy, you guys aren't any different from us, and all that kind of stuff. But of course, such as the deal with this medieval society, you have to rely on people just obeying you and not doing anything. Back then, anybody could just do anything they wanted in theory, which is why they're able to just ambush him at the end, because, like, the announcement that his uncle, might still be alive, I really should have seen that coming. His uncle hasn't been mentioned since, I think, season 2 of this show, so way too much time to not be mentioned, and again, his uncle's horse came back without him, and even then, I don't even think the Wildlings mentioned him. Yeah, they didn't, if I recall correctly. So if the Wildlings don't mention his uncle, then who's left? Because all those White Walker characters, they're mute, even though it turns out that the leader of them isn't the one that we've been seeing this whole time, because I was thinking that because they were indicating that the long-haired guy was the leader, whereas really, I think that was like some prominent person that we've already encountered in the show that was turned into a White Walker. We know what the real leader looks like now. And I gotta wonder what their purpose is, because it's definitely involving magic, but not much happening in that regard. What was left with Bran's storyline at the end of last season, or at least I could have sworn it was last season, it's getting a little tough to keep track of those people, because if I recall correctly, at the end of the third season, they ditched the cat person that looks like Helena Bonham Carter and the youngest Stark brother, and then you follow Bran, Holder, and those two Wildling siblings, and the male one gets killed right at the end there, and then they're talking to that old guy that's basically surrounded by thorns or the like, and then nothing happens to them all season long? Or at least just about all season long, because I watched the second half of this season and nothing flat, so... Yeah, I'm really wondering about that, but again, as I indicated, it didn't seem like they got through all of the 2 books, based on what I can figure out, so... Still a little bit of potential at the beginning of next season, before the show outpaces everything that Martin wrote, even though I'm sure that he gave them a good outline of what he had written of the 6th book by the time they caught up, because he is executive producer of this show after all, though, as I'm sure that we all know, executive producers can either have a lot of influence or not be much more than a name, that kind of a thing. Right. Because Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible, he's got tons of influence. Whereas, I definitely had a good example, and now I've lost it as to who doesn't have that much influence. Drat. I'm sure you could come up with one, though. Yeah. So suppose they never got back to them, but we might get back to that. Anything else to mention about the Night's Watch group? Well, given how they all turn traitor and seemingly leave Snow for dead, that's not the end of the storyline, because you got to remember the Wildlings are technically on the other side now. Granted, though, it's not that many of them. It's just enough to be a fighting force. But they're going to have to do a little bit more with that, because they didn't kill off that prominent Wildling guy, and there's still Sam, obviously. Killing off the Daenerys' old relative, well, it made sense, and given that guy's speech when I first saw him, I'm like, what is he going on? And then, oh yeah, I dreamed I was young again, and I'm like, okay, yeah, he's on his deathbed. So you still got to discuss what happens to Sam, and then there's the guy who, I think that he was always working with Jon and Sam, but then turned traitor on Jon at the end. And because all these people are still alive, you have to do something with that. This isn't the kind of show that is just going to write off caricatures. Like, they could have gotten rid of Bronn, they could have gotten rid of Daenerys' friend, they could have gotten rid of the last Stark kid. Well, actually, the last Stark kid, they just might get rid of. Because he's just there. For whatever reason, Martin decided there would be 5 kids, even though only 4 of them have gotten any prominent storylines. Like, right at the beginning of the first season, I don't think that Rick Karn kid was there. I really don't think he was. So, yeah. And also, I'm really surprised that they did that, because I could have sworn I saw this image that showed Snow meeting another character in the show that he hasn't met yet. So, and it was a real image, okay? I am not crazy in this. So, have to find out, won't I? Because again, that storyline's not going to be completely over. And finally, time to deal with the warlords fighting each other, even though there's less of them now when it comes to things, because Jaime and Bronn going to get Jaime's daughter and then returning, that seemingly takes care of everything that was related to that Tyrell family, because even though, of course, that relative of the prince poisoned Jaime's daughter right at the end there, I don't really think that there's any way that they can go back and continue that bit, especially for what's going on. Maybe they can, and I'm just delusional, I don't know, but maybe. It was nice that he had that bit where one of his three, well, two at the beginning of the season, now one children recognized what happened, and he was finally able to hold them as a father, and then only to have that taken away. That sucks. But now they're really trying to portray him as a sympathetic character, so I really want to know what his final place is going to be, because they're totally going to kill him off. I cannot see Jamie surviving this thing. I can't, but how's he going to go out? Who's he going to support? So yeah, I really want to know that, and it was nice to actually get that resolution with his daughter, because they had just ignored her for quite some time. And then yeah, they have that girl that was supposedly going to be married to Roberts' gay brother. Yes, I know that's not his name, but I keep forgetting it. But since I tell you that, you know exactly who he is. Since that chick is still in prison, and Jamie and Cersei's remaining child is on the front, like that kid, that kid has nothing behind him. Come on. That kid's totally gonna get just tossed aside here. It's ridiculous. Right. But I want to know what happens to that girl that he's married to. I use quotes because it's her just wooing him. Like that, he's just a kid acting on hormones. Come on, he doesn't love her. He thinks he does. Doesn't. Come on. Kid's way too young for that. Then what happened to Cersei there? Well, they've been teasing that religious brotherhood for a little bit, though I can't help but think that prominent guy, not the old guy, but the young one that's been dragging everyone around, I think we're supposed to remember who he is, and yet I don't, but... Well, they finally took some action trying to punish Cersei there, although right at the end it seems like they kind of forgive her, because, as they say, she did confess to one sin, and it's true, she did sleep with that, member of her family that clearly is born of incest and has genetic problems, though interestingly none of Jamie and Cersei's kids seemingly had problems. Yes, Joffrey was a bit mad up there, but he was promised the throne the whole time, and he was raised by Robert strictly. Huh? Right. Can you blame him? Littlefinger trying to continue his bit with Sansa. Yeah, it makes sense that he keep trying to do that, and she got all the way back, to her home, except it's not really her home anymore, but reunites her with Theon, and not completes his redemption arc, but he starts it. Well, yeah, because, what else could you do with Theon? He was just a puppet character this whole time. Now he's finally taking some actions that are not entirely on his own, because, let's face it, did Sansa peer pressure him? Oh, yeah, she did, but he made the final decision. He didn't have to. Literally just seconds before, he was saying, don't do this, Sansa, please come back. Right, so they're finally on the move, but they gotta reunite with, what's her face, lady, and, the Squire kid, because, yeah, on their own, those two aren't going to be able to get anywhere from Winterfell. Sure, Ramsay and Stannis, Roberts' non-gay brother, they basically all wiped each other out, because that was way too many bodies. Even though, Roberts' non-gay brother was outnumbered, you can tell they took out quite a lot of those other guys with them. So Ramsay, he's still got a force, but not nearly as much now. They basically wiped each other out, which allowed her to come in and then take care of him. So that completes that story arc. Obviously, Ramsay's still going to be trying to find Sansa and then try to continue his solidifying of the North. And also, I wonder what's going to be happening to that general guy, because Snow's gone, Stennis is gone, Stennis' daughter is gone too. Like, why did you believe that priestess? And like, why didn't the priestess admit it didn't work? Or anything like that, huh? Yeah, well, we're still going to see more for the priestess, guaranteed, so I wonder what she'll do now. Along with the general guy, because who's he going to follow now? Technically, he doesn't have a leader anymore. Yeah. Wow. Okay, who's left? I kind of touched upon Cersei / Mitchell Lannister's bit. I don't have to discuss her again. I don't think there's really anyone else in King's Landing worth mentioning anymore. Okay, so I guess that just leaves Arya. Yeah, she got cocky, and I get what Jaqen is talking about. She did something that she wasn't supposed to do, admitted who she was, and then she took care of it, but I wonder why he decided to basically blind her, because, along with thinking that he was killing himself, because he wouldn't do that if he didn't think that he could still get her. So you're still trying to get her, and yet you're trying to punish her. No, I get it, okay? That's what anybody would do in that situation, but that strikes me as out of character for him. So, huh? But now, since we're almost at the point where Martin left all the definitive info, I might not get as good of an answer to it as I think, because yes, we haven't gotten to the point where everyone is starting to meet each other, but we've had enough main characters gradually get dismantled over the course of this show that now things are going to be different and a lot more chaotic. Even though it's, as I said before, the warlords are all focused on each other when their real focus, as the Fire Priestess pointed out, needs to be over the wall and then across the sea. Yeah, but again, they're still not doing that. But there's less of them now. So it might just happen. Oh yeah, there's Bronn. Well, he didn't really matter that much this season. I was kind of expecting a little bit more between him and Jaime, and it happened, and yet it didn't. Sure, Jaime stuck up for Bronn, but he didn't have to. You could tell that he wanted to, but yeah, so... yeah, Which has started to get me into my doubting bit, because obviously, some of the next season is going to adapt to what little there is left of the books that have been officially written. We're going to see that. And then he'll give them, and Martin obviously gave the producers an outline about the 6th book. But by that point, he had written quite a decent amount of it that he knew, broadly speaking, what he wanted to occur. So that transition from going from stuff that's definitively written to not, stuff that isn't being written, he'd want that transition to go across as smoothly as possible, because they're going to have a totally different feel now. Because even though I'm sure there's differences between what was written and what has actually occurred on this show, Monta's made that perfectly clear. There's differences between the story arcs, there's differences in what'll happen with what I have written. The ending itself could be totally different, even though he's made it clear that the ending will be different. But the question is how much, because he wouldn't have let the producers finish the show in a way that he disapproved of, but when you get that far ahead of what he has written, and he's barely made any progress ever since the show has ended, and it has nothing to do with the pandemic. It's just creative mind. It's not churning out what he wants it to churn out. He's been working on this series for, broadly speaking, 30 years now. So, you know, it's not the easiest thing. So I'm starting to get my doubts. I'm enjoying it, but I'm starting to get apprehensive. Something tells me this isn't going to resolve in a way that is going to totally satisfy me. Yeah. And it's not going to be like Shameless, where, yeah, the show was left open-ended in a lot of regards, but the way that it was conveyed to you, that open-endedness, is that this is life. The journey doesn't fully end until it literally ends. Whereas this is different. This is something that is set up within a confined set of rules, and that we need to see it play out. So yeah, I know that I definitely talked longer about this season, but quite simply put, there was a lot more to talk about, and I don't know. See ya.